Hello and welcome to Playwright, a podcast about creating and sharing new ways to play. It's our audio game jam where we pitch back and forth brand new video game ideas. And it has been a little while since we've recorded. I spent a couple weeks in England. Ryan, you've spent a couple of weeks playing the SNES. So I think between the two of us, we're both a little rusty here, but I hope that we still are able to ungrease our hinges and get some of that good idea juice flowing.
You know, I was more rusty in more ways than one because I actually found myself going through and playing Zelda and Star Fox and all these games I remember, and I couldn't for the life of me figure out how to get to the second path in Star Fox, or I forgot what order to do the starting dungeons in Link to the Past. So yeah, I was surprised. My old manhood is rapidly approaching.
Let's not talk about your old manhood anymore. Anyways, my name is Ryan Hamann. You can call me H.
And I am and will be Ryan Quintal. You can call me Q.
This week, why don't you start us off with a brand new video game idea?
All right, this week I want to share with you a sort of Resident Evil style game that is featuring sort of out-of-body experiences. So a linear puzzle horror game, very limited combat, if any, and you can kind of reach different points in the game where there are cool, hyper-religious sacrificial altars, and those altars allow you to leave your body. Once you leave your body and you're kind of in non-corporeal form, you can travel to any other place in the world very quickly, but you can sort of get there, but you have to constantly fight off these shadows that are kind of dragging you to hell or want to take you away, as you're not attached to your body, so you shouldn't be there, right? The spirit you can take objects and kind of hold on to one object at a time and can limited maybe push around or slightly manipulate things. But the regular you has no inventory. So this is a little different from your typical Myst or Resident Evil, where it's kind of like collect a bunch of stuff, store it, and then use it later. This is when you're at a impasse, leave your body and go search around a world for maybe something you've encountered before that looked like it could be useful at some point, but you didn't have a use for it then. And then your spirit can kind of envelop the object and jump back into your body, and then you kind of wake up and the object that your spirit took is in the altar in front of you. You could use it to jump back and get a key that you saw earlier. You could maybe go to the other side of a door and do unlocking that way. Maybe you could go back and forth and find heavy stone or physics objects to weigh down switch plates, that sort of stuff. But that is what I'm thinking.
All right, well, let's start the clock then. So this makes me think of a couple of touch points. First of which is cameo elements of power. How if you get enough hits in a row in the kind of like combat encounters, then it sends you into like a slow motion mode. Actually, you'd be going super fast. It just appears like everything else is going slow motion in comparison. And when you're in that space, you can be ambushed by creatures that normally move so fast that they can't be seen. And the idea is that they're always around, but you can only really encounter them when you are in that space. And so everything else becomes super vulnerable to you, except you're also exposing yourself to this new danger. Similarly, there's a level in Titanfall 2 in which you have the ability to shift back and forth between two different time periods at will, and of course expose yourself to different threats in either of those. And so sometimes you'll suddenly shift out of one to avoid gunfire or something and find yourself right in the path of a giant monster in the other. Alternatively to that, the X-Men comics, the character of Nightcrawler who can teleport around. Yeah. There's some reference in the comic books, I believe, that during the teleportation, he doesn't just disappear. He actually goes into an alternate hell dimension and has to fight his way through that to get to the other portal on the other side. So this idea of escape from the physical realm actually being more dangerous than just trekking forward yourself, but having advantages of not being bound by this kind of corporeal form.
Right. I've played with this stuff before on the show, which is the feeling of being in your sort of safe mode and having to have a reason to leave this into an unsafe mode. It's the feeling of you don't really want to get out of the Titan when you're a pilot, right? The anxiety is less so in your corporeal form that things are stalking you in some way, but rather it's the moments where you have to leave your body. Maybe, as you have manipulated the world, things are, the shadows or the bad guys are growing stronger and they want to push back against the things that you're doing because you shouldn't be leaving your body.
Yeah, I think it would be more interesting if you could have the opportunity to shift into the spiritual realm at any time instead of having to wait till you get to an altar. Maybe you could only drop the items at an altar, but it would be kind of neat if this was kind of like Titanfall's eject button mechanic. If things got too hairy in combat, then you always have this option available to you that you could take your chances in the spiritual realm. But, it could be just as intense a fight in there. Maybe something to the effect of like devil daggers until you can get to the other end.
Yeah, maybe there's even playing off of that. I like that a lot. And I think uncoupling it from the altars, but using, if there are altars at all, like using them as the deposit points for things. Maybe it's you can kind of leave your body and come back whenever you want, but the fight to get back to your body is going to be the thing that's a hell of a task of like, okay, I'm going to go leave, run, find this thing. It's mostly an avoid game, but then, the legions bear down on you and you really got to struggle to get back, right? Because maybe in this fiction, it's easier to leave one's body than to return to one's body.
Yeah, that's true. And you could either return to your body or you can push forward and try to find the next altar and maybe kind of like rematerialize there, maybe as like...
or another body, just get a fresh body.
Yeah, sure. I kind of think of the altars as like the reverse version of the bonfires in Dark Souls, where instead of a checkpoint, they're kind of like, you have to get to this point, otherwise your progress is reset.
One of the things I really love about the most recent Doom game, actually, is that look of half-melted candles and strange symbols and the sort of old school, more of an 80s aesthetic of like satanic worship and that sort of stuff. Doom plays it for... environmental effect, but Doom is a pretty, while it's intense, I guess it's kind of a lighthearted game, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And how it treats this type of stuff. And I wonder, is there a way to make that stuff scary again?
The idea that you're kind of playing with forces beyond your control, and of course it comes back to bite you in the butt, but it might be necessary from time to time.
I know we've talked about switching realms and stuff before, but usually that is like the character is static in that way. Could you see some other mechanics where leaving your body could be advantageous other than just to maybe go to a place or retrieve a thing? Is it maybe your human body can't be hurt or something as you're out of it or something like that?
I guess the idea is that it's kind of like having two different modes you can shift between, and there's a lot of games that are like that sometimes when you're shifting the entire world, like in A Link to the Past or Soul Reaver, or sometimes you're shifting between two characters with differential abilities.
You could even say some games when someone is like activating their ultimate mode or their rage mode or something, that they're kind of shifting themselves, right?
Yeah, so I think the obvious thing would be the spirit can go through walls and the body is restricted to walls, but perhaps has other benefits, like is better in combat, or you must be a body to activate certain switches or something like that. But that all feels very obvious. It'd be interesting to find things that you could do uniquely as a spirit, and maybe you're able to like possess other creatures, like animals or monsters or something that maybe not all of the enemies, but some of the other creatures in the environment to perform tasks. Like if you need to inhabit a spider to creep along a very narrow pathway or sneak up behind some enemies to get the drop on them, possessing electronic machines that kind of like lockpick a machine from the inside or hack it from the inside.
Yeah, I do like the idea of kind of what I think the game was the Swapper had a little bit, where when you, and I guess Inside did this too, where you're kind of not possessing a thing, it almost becomes like a physics object. Like your body is heavy, it has weight, right? Like maybe Spirit you needs real you to hold down a button so it can get through, I don't know, a thicker wall, something like that. Allow points where you almost have to abandon yourself in order to continue, and then, find some way to fight back. And, maybe while you're out of your body, you kind of get visions or a sense of your physical body's in danger. So you're almost not allowed to let it die, the ultimate escort mission.
Yeah, or even if the physical body dies, then you still have the option to go to an altar and rematerialize a new body. But almost in the kind of Dishonored game sense, the more dead bodies you leave behind, the more like maggots and rats will infest this world and kind of increase the level of rot and chaos and give you a worse ending. So kind of like a game that I think we did last week. You are incentivized to die as few times as possible, or let your body die as few times as possible. But if it happens, then you can still proceed forward. You're just not going to get the best ending.
I think that makes sense. I've been struggling with, and it's maybe inappropriate that I burden myself when I'm coming up with these ideas of trying to wrap a story around it. But sometimes I think horror is really effective when it is a series of bewildering events and you don't know why it's happening, but maybe ultimately there's a purpose to it.
Yeah, when making games, come up with the core, kind of like what is the player going to be doing first, and then fill in the rest later, and eventually it'll all come together. But that is going to have to wait for another time. We have to close the book on that.
We have to leave our bodies.
Yes, that's right. We have to leave that one behind, like so many bodies behind us. Yeah, I don't know about that. Oh, we'll keep working on the catchphrase there. But do you have a name for this particular game?
Well, H, at this point, you know me, I go for pith, and that is outer.
All right. Yeah. So it's kind of like the opposite of inside then.
That's right. I guess I could have went for outside, but yeah, outer. I just want an outer body experience. Invoke that.
Yeah. Your innies and outies. Today, I'm going to be pitching a little bit more self-indulgently than I usually do. This one is kind of a fan fiction-y type of game. It's not something that I would probably ever realistically be able to make, even if I had the skills to do it. But it's just kind of fun to think about. I want to do a hybrid of two series that I love very much, The Legend of Zelda and of Dark Souls. And I wanted to think about what would a Dark Souls-like game be like if it was set in the Zelda universe. And so what I'm putting forward is the cycle of Links and Ganons and Zeldas has continued for thousands of years in the land of Hyrule. And the kingdom has been destroyed by Ganon over and over and over again, and are pretty much on the brink of absolute extinction of the species. And they know that every time Link comes around again, it means that the destruction of their world in Ganon's wake is just around the corner. And so everyone is very, very deeply prejudiced against the Link figure as he is reincarnated time and time again. The influence of Ganon that makes a Link appear to be the bad guy when really, Ganon is the one who's doing all of the damage, but still, you are incarnated as the new Link. It could be either a male or female, of course. And the idea is that you kind of keep a low profile because people aren't receptive to a new Link in the world. But this operates as kind of a regular Souls-like game. There are bonfires that you can go between. There's that challenging and really a deep combat system. Just kind of think like a standard Dark Souls adventure, but set in the world of Hyrule. You start the game in Hyrule, and the castle isn't far away from you. You can go straight to the castle, just like Breath of the Wild, but chances are you're not actually going to make it there. What happens is that the world of Hyrule is full of really excellent treasures, is full of really difficult enemies. It's kind of the late game area. And every time you die in Hyrule, you're sent to Termina from Majora's Mask. And that is kind of the early game area. And in this land of Termina, you can go from town to town and dungeon to dungeon, just like in Dark Souls, and kind of make that standard progression. But if you re-imbue your humanity, or whatever the equivalent would be in this game, you reascend back to the world of Hyrule. And you can use that for, push a little bit further and get some of those higher level weapons. And so it's always kind of up to you. If you think you can brave the very difficult land of Hyrule for a little bit more and just push a little bit harder and get your hands on something really useful, then that can serve you pretty well down in Termina again. And so a few more of the changes that I want to introduce into this particular game is that drawing from Majora's Mask, you can wear masks that grant you passive benefits, just like the rings in Dark Souls, except in this one you can wear up to 4 masks at once, but one of them would be over your face. That would be a primary mask, and any mask can be worn as the primary mask. And so each mask can have 2 separate effects, a primary and a passive effect. And so, if you were wearing one that reduces or that increases the amount that you can carry without being over encumbered, then wearing it on the primary slot would do it a great deal. Wearing it on a passive slot would be less so, but still helpful. Just thinking through a little bit more strategically where you wear the equivalent of rings, as it would have been in the past Dark Souls games. But eventually, you can challenge the final boss at really any point if you can get to it. But otherwise, there's a kind of fully fledged Dark Souls-y type game hidden in there, and a lot of references to past Zelda titles. Of course, it's something that I really like, and so you can pick up the Four Sword, and every time you slice it, it comes in with 3 spectral links that attack alongside with you, and you can pick up the Minish Cap or all these great weapons and armors and places from past Zelda games, but reinterpreted with the kind of bleak, dark, end of the world type of Dark Souls experience. So I'm going to stop talking and put that one on the table. Let's start the clock on this Legend of Zelda Dark Souls game.
Very cool. Okay, so right out the gate, I want to establish in my brain, so I'm just there with you. Does this look more like a Zelda / Breath of the Wild, maybe a Twilight Princess, or does this look more like a Bloodborne-y Dark Souls-y game?
I'm thinking it looks more Dark Souls-y, like people are regularly proportioned, and the world is more kind of naturalistic rather than stylized, but that's flexible.
What I really like about this is I got 2 of those Dark Horse books that explain sort of Zelda lore, and the Zelda lore would make a lot of sense in random documents and whispers and object descriptions, the way that those games sort of present themselves and their environment and their story. But I also love the masks as there's a strong in-fiction reason, right? You maybe don't want to be seen as Link, right? You don't want people to know. And so you are this kind of mysterious masked person who is going from town to town. That's really strong.
And having enemies kind of on both sides of the fence of the regular citizens are somewhat against you. You'll meet a lot of people who are not a lot of people, because there's never a lot of people in a Dark Souls game, but you'll meet people who are more kind of passive and are happy to trade wares with you for rupees, or You'll meet some that are outright hostile to you, but, not all of the encounters, not all the combat encounters are going to be monsters. Some of them are just going to be the regular citizens who have been brought up with this mistaken notion that Link is the one to be feared.
I love the idea of even Kakariko Village being a threatening place for the first time in a Zelda game. You go there and it's overbearing and you're hated by the people. And as I'm playing Link to the Past right now, one of the main bad guys, at least when you start the game, is just straight up royal guards all over the place. And those not only would look great in a Dark Souls type of presentation, but the heavy axes versus the ones with the pikes versus the ones with swords that travel in straight lines versus come right at you. Those themselves can be very intimidating.
Yeah, and as a massive nerd and somebody who's played way more Zelda games than anyone really needs to, I think it'd just be a lot of fun to reinterpret all of these Zelda items and characters and enemies and stuff into this different, more realistic style. To pick up the Majora's Mask in some dark corner of the world, or to see what these like Phantom Warriors would look like in this different art style. I think it'd be really cool.
If the kind of visiting Hyrule at any point is a part of it, I do love the idea of finding treasures in a Dark Soulsian type of game linked to that Eye of Truth that you get in Zelda's, or the way they had that in Ocarina of Time that kind of hit those Eye of Truth stones and they would say these weird cryptic things at you. I would love to see the water/ice temple in a Dark Souls like environment, because now like Dark Souls is always great of having this interconnected map, but I think it would be even better if along that sort of path that is the interconnected map is these really intricate dungeons and buildings.
Yeah, solving puzzles along the way. Every once in a while you have to do a switch puzzle or something, but for the most part, the puzzles in Dark Souls are pretty simple. It's mostly kind of combat focused, but yeah, in interjecting some of that Zelda-like puzzle solving back into the series would be really cool.
It's also an opportunity to make, as much as the, quote, Ganon battles have been more and more, I guess, cinematic as of late in Zelda games, it would nice for Ganon to be in kind of a style that feels really scary again and threatening and legitimately hard. I think by the time you're at the end of Breath of the Wild, for example, Ganon is kind of a cakewalk for all intents and purposes.
Yeah.
So to have this battle feel seemingly impossible to overcome, at least the first couple times you attempt it, or even just approaching Hyrule, or I think you could even go as compressed as, Zelda's castle is the immediate small area with all the bushes and the guards and the super difficult enemies in a really compressed space, and getting in there and finding the rooms have all those great treasures. But, so now you have a language of like, yeah, I was in Terminus, but I bounced out and I made it through room 1 of Zelda's castle. So it's like you have two speeds of game, right? You have Terminus, which is bigger and maybe a little grindier, but then it's almost like Destiny style in service of doing the quote raid that is one room of Zelda's castle.
You get these people who play soul level 1 runs on Dark Souls and just try to beat the game without ever leveling up, or without any armor, or without even the sword sometimes. And this would just be kind of in service to them and giving them a really hard way to play the game and just go straight for that final boss if they want to. Same thing with Breath of the Wild, gave you that freedom, and some people have done some pretty impressive things with it.
I hate to keep drawing these parallels, but starting a Dark Souls-like game with the simplicity that Zelda games usually start off with, which is simply just Link waking up, having that moment and being thrust into this really unwelcoming version of all these places that you in your mind are, oh, it's all great. It's generally, I feel like every memory of Zelda games for me is usually pretty positive, like in terms of everything seems kind of inviting. There's obviously some more threatening parts, but I'm like, oh, I can't wait to see this game's version of that town and this game's version of that dungeon or whatever, versus when I played Bloodborne, I was cringing every time I entered a new area, like, what's going to kill me now, right?
I'm kind of curious about how going between worlds would work. I'm thinking at the halfway point of the game, once you've effectively beaten Termina, then you would get an item that allows you to permanently ascend into Hyrule, because at that point you're ready for it. Maybe like the Lens of Truth or something like that.
Some sort of skyward sword?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't want to necessarily be your weapon, because I don't want you to force the players to play the rest of the game with just one weapon, but to have some sort of an item that will, be on their person, kind of like the Lord Vessel in Dark Souls, so that allows more kind of freedom of mobility, so they don't have to keep re-embering or re-imbuing themselves with humanity every time they want to take another run at Hyrule, which is essentially where the rest of the game is going to be.
So maybe some of this could even be expressed with the legendary ocarina, right?
Oh, yeah.
Another great mechanic for expressing that sort of stuff is the way Ocarina of Time did putting the Master Sword back in its place. Like, you're not allowed to take your best weapon with you or something when you get to Zelda's castle.
Yeah, that would be interesting. Although, Dark Souls and Bloodborne are so kind of built around people forming deep relationships with their weapon of choice.
Yeah.
And so it'd be really a shame to take that away from them, because you could spend the entire game of Dark Souls and Bloodborne, especially with the weapon that you started with.
One of the things that I don't think Ocarina did enough of, which is most of the times you learn the songs in that game, it's from someone saying, hey, here's this song, let me teach it to you. And I think there's only like one or two scenarios where you're kind of listening to the ambient sound and pecking out a song. So I wonder if, in a Soulsian / I guess from Softwareian type fashion, there are those weird ambient, like ghostly whistles in the wind and towns where you're hearing songs and you're just invited to try them, and some things do things. Maybe some of the songs have a debuff on your character, really, so you can have that level 1 run, and then you can have the level 1 run where you've got the debuff that puts you at half health or something.
It'd be interesting if the songs were, or like the written records of the songs were destroyed by the townspeople because they want to pretty much just, halt the adventure of Link at whatever cost.
Yeah.
But the goddesses still chose you, and you're still, driven by the magic of the sword and the goddesses and the Triforce. And so, it's like nature is conspiring to help you on your journey, and they're trying to communicate in any way possible, but the people are just going to be a complete roadblock.
I know we're coming up against it on this one, but I do want to pitch to you one boss battle that could be the chained wild Epona horse battle, where it, like, this is a horse that doesn't recognize you, it hates you, it's bucking, it's crazy, and you actually have to put down the horse in a Zelda game.
Oh, that'd be interesting. It's kind of like the Sif battle in Dark Souls 1.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. There's a lot to think about there. I'd love to hear, especially from the community, more ideas of what Zelda bosses would you like to see brought back in a Dark Souls kind of way, and give us some idea of what those battles would look like. I'd love to hear about that. Dodongos and choo-choos or whatever.
So much good stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot there. Oh, and maybe even shrinking down to like, anyways, you know what? We've talked enough about that. All right, we have to move on. The name that I've come up with that game, I am calling this one The Legend of Zelda: Souls of Hyrule.
Better than Dark Booze, which is what I would have gone with. I
don't mind a good dark booze on a Friday after work. So we have a listener submission. This comes from Spencer Saunders, who we've heard from before, and we encourage anyone who has submitted before, please feel free to submit again. We've enjoyed your ideas so far, and so don't feel like you are prohibited from resubmitting. If you haven't submitted before, then please, we welcome you with open arms to submit to playwrightcast@gmail.com. or pitch it on our website, playwrightcast.com/pitch, and we will read it and discuss it on a future show. Spencer Saunders says, you play the ghost or spirit of a person who had just died. The game works in 2 layers that you alternate between. The first is the real world in a top-down perspective, and it begins at the time of death. You appear as the person's spirit over their body. Due to trauma, you have little recollection of the events leading up to this. The room is dark, and you can't see much around you. You hear voices from outside coming closer, and you are prompted to move the body somewhere hidden. The game switches layers to a 2D platformer. You are still playing as the character's spirit, but in this layer of the game, you are trying to reach an end, an afterlife, reincarnation, nothing, whatever comes next. I imagine this portion of the game would feel very similar to Spelunky and Rayman Oranges Lemons. Throughout the game, you are switching between the 2 layers, learning more about the character's passing, keeping the body hidden from the pursuers, and making the journey to cross over. P.S. I have details of the story in my head, but will share them upon request if you want, as I need a bit more time to work it all out. And if you'd like to hear more about those additional details, Spencer Saunders can be reached on Twitter at TLEPRIE, Tleppery. Let us go ahead and start the clock on that.
Spencer, my man, you've come at us again with another good one, and you've accidentally officially made this a spooky spirit episode. All 3 of us have pitched.
Yeah, that's right.
Kind of solely in boo spirit-based games, but this is really cool. I am thinking in my head that maybe an interesting format, like as you're trying to reach, it's funny, we think of falling off a ledge or hitting spikes or whatever in 2D platformers as dying, but maybe it's dying in this afterlife, like as you're marching towards the light, is what sends you back into your body, right? So it's, you can, every time it's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back.
Yeah, he talks a lot about switching between like 2 realms, and I assume that means like the spirit realm and the body realm, kind of like your idea, but I guess if your body's dead, then you're not really going back to it. And so I kind of see this as being like one realm, but there can be like multiple layers, like shifting into the wall, kind of like on Link Between Worlds or different things. But one of the twists that I want to throw at this is that maybe for each world, so to speak, there'd be 5 or 6 worlds like you would find in a Mario game. You can play as the spirit of different characters in different like parts of the world that have different religions and different ideas of what happens to you after you die. And then you have to kind of like complete these platforming challenges in adherence to the Hindu ideas and the Shinto ideas and the Christian ideas. And I guess the atheist idea would be pretty easy. You just stop playing. But, platforming challenges that are specifically like revolving around these different ideas.
There's a nice message to be had in that, right? Which is maybe everybody's right. Maybe there is, maybe you're a butterfly, maybe there is meeting all your old relatives and everyone you've ever loved and all that stuff is right. And those are what the levels of the game are, the same way that there are, fictionally levels to hell. Maybe there's levels to ascension or whatever. And, as these things pass, you're realizing that it allows you to kind of make a pan-religious, like allude to many of these concepts and ideas without necessarily having to be too on the nose about them.
Well, but I mean, even if you are on the nose, like maybe it can be kind of an educational thing as well. It's like you get to learn through experience, like, oh, this is what this different belief system kind of believes in. It at least triggers enough keywords and gives you enough imagery to get an idea in your mind so that you can go to Wikipedia later and do some real reading. Maybe for like a Buddhist level, there can be some level of reincarnation of, each level is you play as a different like animal or something, and you're working yourself kind of higher through the steps of enlightenment. Yeah. And maybe for a Christian level, you could be always kind of ascending upwards, trying to platform your way higher and higher while you're fighting off traditional kind of Christian demons and stuff like imagery like you would see in biblical stories. And, just invoking the imagery and maybe even art styles of these different religions in a way that can teach you something about different belief systems that you might not hold.
I think that that's really cool. And if you start to bring in some of the, I know we're kind of picking on Buddhism and Christianity, but that's, I guess, more our wheelhouse than some other religions. But when you're a Christian or even a Catholic, you have I'm able to look down on, my family and look after them and stuff when I'm gone. And Spencer mentions here that you're kind of learning about the person as they go. And so when you're there, you're learning about what you're able to see down, and maybe you see the service or whatever your service, and you learn what your family loved about you, and they recall times that you had together, and you're kind of reliving this person's life. And then when it's time for Buddhism and Nirvana, you're reincarnated as X, Y, or Z, because this is what you had as a profession, or this is something that you did in your life that was very important to you, and now it's being expressed to you in a different way. So everything is a commentary about how you lived your life, and that allows you to have kind of, whether it's difficult levels or an arc that gives you maybe the mistakes you've made or the bad decisions you've made throughout your life, and having to, sometimes quite literally face those demons, right? That you yourself have created.
Yeah, there's a book called 40 Tales from the Afterlives. It's written by David Eagleman, and it's a really interesting, really small book, easy read, of 40 short stories about, possible theoretical afterlives, and none of them are being pitched as like, I think this is what the afterlife is really like based on my reading. It's all like just, imaginative storytelling. But it's really fun. It's a really excellent book. Some of the short stories are only like 1 to 3 pages long. And so it's real easy to get through, but they all give you really interesting kind of philosophical questions to really kind of think about for a while. And the types of stories that really stick with you. It's like, these ideas of what happens to the souls and the purpose for us being here in the first place. And the idea of, maybe God's just minding his own business and doesn't even notice us, or something like that. And so as a parallel recommendation, I will put that forward, Some by David Eagleman.
I love Eagleman's books. He's got another one called Incognito that I'm in love with as well. He's a neuroscientist. Pretty crazy.
Yeah. It's cool.
And, Spencer, I would love, especially listeners, I know this isn't exactly a pitch, but if you want to write in, maybe you follow a religion that has ideas that for whatever reason you feel like could map to gameplay, this is a really great way of expressing some of those things, because I think we've all, when you're a little kid and you're growing up and you hear these tales about what the afterlife, if your family believes in that, or if you choose to believe in that, the experience is always abstract, right? Of like, I wonder what that could be like. And video games don't often explore that territory outside of simply, almost like I feel bad cracking on what I pitched earlier, but spirit realm, normal realm, what is the spirit realm? What is a spirit?
I think Too Human played with the Valkyries taking these kind of Norse warriors away, and that's kind of cool. But it would be interesting to see some representations of not only the afterlife beliefs, but also kind of the culture surrounding these religions. So, the wonderful pattern art of the Islamic faith, and the kind of Japanese woodblock prints for the Shinto levels. And I could get really into a game with a constantly shifting art style as well, and the music to back that up. Although we'd have to be careful, because many games, I think like 3 or 4 now, have gotten in trouble for including the same Islamic call to prayer.
Oh, God.
Little Big Planet and Legend of Zelda, and at least 1 or 2 more.
In their defense, it's very catchy. One of my favorite prayers. I also just want to experience something like this where, hell is often that because it's cooler or whatever is the thing that's so often represented. So to see the other side of that coin and see someone actually, completing their journey or completing their life, or hey, let's bring in some fictional religions. Let's have the Klingons die in battle, right? So let's have, a good old battle stage in there.
Or maybe a like final unlockable like bonus stage based on Scientology.
Where you become a nuclear bomb and you get everyone's
you're
feet
ascending
out.
through some like universal volcano up to the spaceship of Xenu or whatever.
And it all starts in Montana and you have a driver's license. It's very weird. Very, very weird.
Could be fun. Well, anyways, sorry we got a little sidetracked at the end there, but that is Spencer Saunders' game. He does not come to us with a title for that one, but I feel like we'll be able to come up with something. Let's see. It's going to say Spirited Away, like I was the one who thought about that, but nope, that doesn't quite.
No.
It's not.
I mean, I keep wanting to play off of like Life After or Afterlife, or maybe you do more Japanese. You go like Afterlife DX++ or something.
Afterlife by itself might just work.
We could do maybe Afterlives.
Afterlives, yeah, sure. I'll go with that then. This is Spencer Saunders, Afterlives. Anyways, thank you for submitting that. If you would care to submit anything for a future show, any idea that is rattling around in the back of your mind that you feel would be super fun to just throw onto an Xbox someday, then get in touch with us. We are playwrightcast@gmail.com or playwrightcast.com/pitch. That is PLAYWRITECAST, all one word.
I want to thank PROTODOME for the use of our theme song, Hello World. It's off that album, Blue Noise. It's a banger. Go buy it on Bandcamp.
Yes, and Q, do you have a final little tidbit of an idea to whet our listeners' imagination on the way out today?
Oh, you better believe I do. In the weird theme of today is a building a cult simulator.
All right, I like that. Man, I could even talk about that for 10 minutes, but yeah. Let's throw that out there. If you have anything to add to it, then tweet us. We'd love to hear it.
Pitch it back
we'll
at
see
us.
you next week.
Bye.